Waiting for a chance, for an opportunity, for an answer. Waiting for the train, for the movie to begin, for that server to come over and take your order. Waiting for this pandemic to be over. Waiting for school to begin, whatever that's going to look like. Waiting for us to return to normal life, whatever that means. Waiting. The gospel today is a parable that's found only in Matthew. It's the story about the wise and the foolish bridesmaids. I'm sure you've heard that story many times before. Who had the oil, who lacked the oil for their lamps. It's a reminder as we read that story that in the ancient world, weddings were much different than they are today. It was the arrival of the groom that actually signaled the beginning of the days of celebration as he came to the bride's home. And because there were no cell phones or regular phones, the ETA of the groom was completely unknown. And because during that time, people often traveled at night rather than in the heat of day, there was a very good chance that the groom could arrive in the middle of the night. So you had to wait for him to show up. A lot of waiting going on. And so then comes the story of the group of bridesmaids. Some have lamps ready to greet him. Another group, not so much ready. Don't you wonder in that story, well, what were those foolish bridesmaids thinking? This was not the first time they ever were at a wedding. They knew the drill. They knew how this all went. They knew that the groom's arrival could be unpredictable. But then I think we understand it when we look at our own life. When you've had to wait for something mundane or something very important. Very often we get bored. We are not invested. You don't think of anyone but yourself. You start to give up. You think of only what you need. And then we become impatient and distracted. And we totally miss the moment. Jesus wanted disciples who are alert and ready and prepared for his coming, not just at the end of the world, but in our daily life. And when we realize that part of the spiritual journey is about waiting, we come to realize that the answers to life's questions are not found by a Google search or a clever YouTube video. Today is the feast of Saint Augustine of Hippo. He died on this date in 430 in the Christian era. And one of the most famous stories about his life involves his mother, Saint Monica, whose feast day was yesterday. Now, Chris Small gave the reflection yesterday, and I'm not certain what exactly he said because I've recorded this not knowing what he is actually saying. But I am going to tell you this, that Monica waited for years for her son Augustine to move from his bad boy ways to accept Christ and to follow him. She waited for years. Her patience and her prayers eventually paid off because Augustine not only accepted faith, but he became one of the greatest theologians and philosophers in those first centuries of the church. And much of his writing had a direct effect on the theology of the church today. I like this picture of Augustine and his mother. It's sort of beautiful. It's from the 19th century Dutch-French painter Ary Scheffer. Now, St. Augustine wrote about many things, many aspects of Christian life. He wrote about the sacramental life, the liturgical life, the theological aspects of Christian faith, as well as the moral life. And he believed very strongly that it is the grace of God that changes us. It's what converted him. And it's the grace of God that gives us hope in the times of waiting. So one quote of his does come to mind of all the many things he wrote over the time that he lived. He writes this about the virtue of hope. Hope has two beautiful daughters. Their names are anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are. Saint Augustine and his mother were from Africa. His family were Berbers, and this is an ethnic group of indigenous people from North Africa. And so I cannot help but think today of another event that took place on August the 28th in 1963, the Great March on Washington, where 250,000 people descended upon that city in the heat of the summer to advocate for the civil and the economic rights of African Americans, feeling they had waited too long for those rights to be given to them. And this is where Dr. Martin Luther King, this is where he gave his very famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Dr. King was a minister. He had gone to school and studied theology, and even as a Protestant minister, he would have studied Saint Augustine and known Saint Augustine's works and his influence on Christian faith. And when you read his speech, Dr. King's speech from that day, you see that it is filled with the kind of hope Saint Augustine wrote about, that there were two daughters there as well, anger at the way things are, and the courage to assure that they do not remain the way they are. Waiting. The events of these past months have been challenging. There's been struggles, and some of them have been national, worldwide. A lot of them have been our own personal struggles. And this has been a time when we have been called to hope. In many ways, that's one of the essential parts of being a Christian, a Catholic in our own time, to live in a spirit of hope and to also do what we can in the spirit of courage, to change the injustices that people have been waiting too long to see changed. But, I think it also means looking at our daily life and thinking about where is the virtue of hope needed personally. Maybe today you have to name the anger that you might be feeling about the way things are in your personal life, how things have changed, how things are not in your control. And also, it's a day maybe to name your desire for courage, that the grace of God will come to you and strengthen you to help you put the past behind and to begin again today. One of the great aspects, the great parts of the spiritual life is the sense of waiting. It's not just praying and getting the solution. It's not just praying and feeling good and feeling happy. These months of the pandemic and the months that I think we're still going to experience in the time ahead, I think these times of waiting may be for many of us, I dare say most of us, the most important days of the spiritual journey of our entire life. Perhaps today it is Dr. King and his willingness to have the light burning, keep that light burning, no matter how long he had to wait, to instill in us the spirit of hope. It's his words that we might meditate on today and take with us as we continue the journey. He writes, "This is our hope, and this is the faith that I go back to the south with. With this faith, we will be able to hew out of the mountain of despair a stone of hope. With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into the beautiful symphony of brotherhood. With this faith, we will be able to work together, to pray together, to struggle together, to go to jail together, to stand up for freedom together, knowing that one day we will all be free." May the grace of God come to all of us this day, in the spirit of hope, to find us in our waiting, know that the Lord is near, and his light is shining bright.